and welcome to the Data for Subscriptions podcast, where we learn and explore how to run better subscription businesses. I'm your host, Berat Bonyan, and today I have the pleasure of welcoming Tapish Kumar, Senior Product Pricing and Strategy Director from Freshworks, to the show. Welcome, Tapish.
Thank you so much, Vedad. It's great to be here.
We have an exciting topic lined up. It's AI monetization, and that's the biggest, seems to be, topic that's running in the industry right now, because of the fact that it's also the debate around usage-based and what that means. But before we get to this really exciting topic, why don't we start with a short introduction about yourself, Tapish? I mean, you've been in and around product pricing and business model evolution from the get-go. Tell us what makes you so passionate about that space, and also how it led you to Freshworks.
Thank you so much, Vedad. I think it's a great question. I think my passion really lies about how we have transformed business models and how companies have evolved their businesses over a period of time. I'll start I start post B school. I started my career with Adobe, and I'm sure a lot of people know here. Adobe is actually a classic case study for how to transform your business. And I was part of the journey, not as part of the pricing team, but essentially from the partner side. And you can think about that's when I started realizing that when you change any pricing, any business model, what kind of impacts that you have externally, customers, partners, and then internally, if you think about what impact does it have on how you enable sellers, how do sellers actually sell the value of the product? I mean, there are multiple things that I saw about this, and that's how I started getting very intrigued about business model evolution. And my next job at Autodesk was all about business model evolution, and that's how the passion for pricing started. And so, as I grew in my career, what happened as a result is now AI is very big thing. I've always started looking into big trends. It was at some point it was IoT, and now it is AI. So I'm actually at Freshworks looking at AI monetization. As any other company is investing in AI.
And tell us a little bit more about Freshworks as well. We'll get back to discuss more of the offerings and details later on. But what do you do as a company at Freshworks?
So Freshworks is actually a pretty young company. It's one of the first Indian startups. Now actually we have gone global, so it's no more an Indian startup. We started in 2010, and we were the first Indian company which actually went IPO on Nasdaq. And we actually do a cloud-based software SaaS company, and we provide cloud-based tools for cloud relationship management, that is CRM, ITSM, and then e-commerce marketing as well.
All right, let's jump right back into the topic then. So there's been several announcements in the last couple of months. One of the more known ones is Salesforce that started to introduce its AI agents and shifting its business model to usage-based. As a starting point, Tapish, why don't you give your view of what are we talking about when we're speaking about AI monetization? Because it might mean something, but it might mean different things to different people. So you should level set, what are we talking about here when we say AI monetization?
So I think from AI monetization, one of the key things is that I think based on our interaction with customers and partners and several other folks, is that people are starting to look at AI as a value driver, a real value driver. I mean, we talk about value-based selling, value-based pricing a lot, but what value am I going to get with AI? And obviously, there are a lot of hesitation and skepticism about AI as well amongst large customers, mid-sized customers, to around trust governance. But at the end of the day, what value am I getting? So what is happening is that when companies started monetizing AI, they wanted to dip their toes in the water and see whether the customer is ready to evolve and buy more. So think about like Microsoft Copilot, right? Microsoft actually started doing it with the seed-based model, and then they started like, hey, am I seeing adoption? Are all customers buying, AI? And are they covering for the entire user base? I mean, there are a lot of questions that came along with it. So I think the seed-based model is where we started with AI monetization, and now with more and more a value which is being driven, like with LLMs that are coming out and the models that are coming out of OpenAI, I think people are starting to move towards customers are starting to ask about value, and that's why consumption-based models are starting to pick up a little bit.
Yeah, and there's been many reasons for it. One of the topics that has been raised is that it's simply not sustainable because we can take ChatGPT, which is arguably the most known
Yeah.
example when it comes to AI applications. First, it was tested for free, and then
Mhm.
came the monetization on top of it.
Correct.
Now they're tracking the usage in terms of how many queries that you actually feed into the system.
Mhm.
Similarly, other tools that we can just line up, you might have a number of credits, but again, here what you are doing is that you're paying a fee, you get a number of credits, and it starts to count down based on how many queries that you ask it. So
Correct.
these are the examples, and we're still at the absolute infancy of what we're seeing in
Yes.
terms of the applications that are going to be embedded in every single situation that we are interacting with our, IT tools, phones, where it might be.
If I have to add one more thing is generally what we are seeing is uh, people thought AI is premium earlier. Now it is actually starting to become table stakes. So, and as a result, what you would see is a lot of customers, a lot of vendors are actually thinking about, hey, should I actually include AI as part of my existing capability, existing packaging, existing pricing plans? And the reason is because they want more adoption, and AI is actually essentially more augmentation of existing features as opposed to being a premium feature or a different use case altogether.
Right. No, that's an excellent point. Let's talk now about Freshworks and your offering because you're basically offering and doing precisely what you're describing for us. So, walk us through again. I mean, you've laid the foundation of what your overall offering is, but let's go down into this is how it works and how you've embedded AI into it.
Okay. Yeah, so I think with Freshworks, I think we were also, I mean, I think like any other company about AI monetization, we were nervous about whether the product will be used, how will it be used. I think we had some hypothesis about customer use cases, but I think we have obviously matured a lot in the last. So we started with obviously beta testing like any other company, like public beta. Let's have customers test it out, give us feedback about it. So private beta, public beta, and then finally we went GA last February with at least our Copilot offering, and then we're just going beta with our AI agents capabilities too. And there's some like very exciting AI capabilities coming or products coming very soon as well. But what has happened is obviously when we were also tiptoeing, we also went into the agent based, or I should say seed based pricing for the product. And we also realized that a lot of the customers were like, hey, I don't want to use AI for all my entire install base. I just wanted to use it for a certain case because or certain use case, certain number of seats because first I don't trust AI as much. Second, I don't know how much value will it deliver. And the third is essentially is there a cost aspect. So we also learned a lot about pricing as well as part of that exercise.
Tell us a little bit more about the challenges that you've been facing, or for that matter, what you see as well other companies would be facing when stepping into providing AI based services.
So I think so that I would describe the challenges in few categories here. The first one is essentially at the time of selling itself, value realization. So customers, obviously, as I said, customers are not very customers feel do not have the trust on what AI can do for that, and essentially it's all about value realization. What use cases will I solve for you? And as we mature, as different companies mature, that was so. And second is how do we enable sellers to go convince the customers that yes, this is value add. Now this is great for an SLG customer or sales led growth companies, but when you look at PLG companies, you don't have sellers selling it. In such a case, what happens is you need very strong demos or very strong presence out there to show that what value can we drive. Now, is it people are now starting to compare what we can do versus what OpenAI can do for free or even for $20 a month, right? For their pro plan. So those some of those challenges are coming up as well. One, second is once they start, even if they purchase, it's an add-on right now. So the customers are like, it's another decision for them. Like, oh, do I really need to purchase this? It's another add to my budget. Should I do it? Should I not do it? Those kind of questions, and as a result our attach rates are low for when it's an add-on, and I think add-ons is a typical low attach rates. Then once they start, the second part is once they get onboarded, they always think about their base capabilities. So let's say if I buy an ITSM, I would think about resolving my IT issues, not about using AI to resolve IT issues.
Right.
So the adoption curve is also longer in such a case. So by the time they come up for renewals, I mean, they have probably, the half of the like time is already gone and they're not started using AI. So that is another challenge on adoption. How do we increase adoption? One, how do we reduce adoption time as well?
You mentioned a couple of times proving value to customers, and just providing usage based in itself uh, gives a lot of challenges because you need to be able to measure that usage meticulously. And we're going to get to that in a few minutes as well. But already now, I'm not only yourself, I'm hearing other people in the industry speaking about outcome based. Outcome based is arguably even harder because that's about understanding precisely what value means for the customer.
Mm-hmm.
In your view, have you already started, or at Freshworks, have you already started to experiment with outcome based and try to figure out what value lies for customers?
So in consumption-based pricing, there are, or I should say, outcome-based. There's outcome-based pricing, which is essentially what value that you get out of
Yeah.
this. The second one is action-based as well. So if you think you asked about Salesforce, and
Mhm.
Salesforce is actually, in my mind, is actually an action-based, because in a conversation it could be a successful conversation or it could be not be a successful conversation. In such a case, it's not an outcome, it is just an action that is happening as a result of it. We are starting to see evolution of consumption based pricing to action and outcome. Now, to answer your question, are we exploring ideas about outcome? Yes, we are exploring our ideas about outcome, but then there are several challenges around outcome, especially around the fact that the first big challenge with outcome is definition. And how do you define what an outcome means for a customer? And what we have seen is when we actually start defining outcome definitions, customers do dispute it a lot because they also want transparency around every single conversation. So think about AI agents, right? AI agents, I do not have, as a customer, I do not have control over what AI agents are doing. I would not know what kind of outcome am I getting. But if I don't, if, as a vendor, if I give you the transparency on every single what conversation led to, whether it was the right outcome or not, that's when you can reduce the disputes and conflicts around it. So outcome based pricing is great, but it is extremely difficult at this point of time because of definition issues.
Got it. Let's flip a little bit to discussing more of the back-end requirements that are needed in order to kind of enable this usage-based monetization that we've been discussing. So as a starting point, what requirements would it put on your, or does it put on your quote to cash system?
Great question. So I think AI and consumption is a great change, or I should say, transforming lever for quote to cash systems. If I have to say, I think there are three pieces to the quote to cash. One is when it comes to usage data. One is collection of usage data that is extremely important, and that helps define us more strategy. Once we analyze it better, then we actually be able to create right strategies. That's the whole fundamental framework around usage data.
Mm-hmm.
But one is usage data collection. Second is preparing and analyzing this data, because that is extremely important. While you can collect all the data, but if you're not analyzing it well, you cannot create right strategies, and you cannot do solve customer problems. And last but not the least, once you get the data, is the billing piece of it. Because what happens is, when you look at billing, right, it's a especially with outcome based pricing or consumption based pricing, there is always conflict, always disputes with customer around how much did they use and how much are they supposed to pay. Because what happens is people end up going into overages, they overuse, and they think there is a definition that they understood, and that is where we start seeing a lot of conflicts, and that creates a lot more manual effort. We need more people to resolve this, and CSAT gets a hit. I mean, there are a lot of those things that happen too.
Yeah. So from our observation point, most businesses, even SaaS companies who've arguably been in a digitalized model from day one. When it comes to the automation maturity of the whole usage data management flow, it's still fairly poor. So there's a lot of improvement area. So on a more higher level, where would you say you are at Freshworks in terms of having the automation level across the board in the entire process? So we can start with the collection. Where would you say you guys are?
So I think with collection, we're fairly automated because we're a SaaS company, right? So we do, I think we do a good job of the moment the customer starts on board, is onboarded, like how many times did the customer log in? How much, how much are they using? What features are they using? How many times are they using? Who is using it? What are they using it for? And obviously, we have some augmentation with our CSM, so customer success organization, where we get some of this information too, but we have a very fairly good understanding by because of collection. Now I think there is a semi-automated stage when it comes to preparing the data. So while we collect the data in the data lake, now how do you use this data is the next challenge, and we are semi-automated in that portion.
Yeah, so here we're speaking about we can call it the analytics piece, and you highlighted how important it is to learn off of the customer's usage. Yeah.
Correct. Yes. So I think I mean, like we have certain tools right now, and I think, as I said, we're a fairly young company and we're a startup. So it was like, hey, we start with very basic tools, and I think at this point of time there is a need to be more mature about some of the tools about collecting and analyzing data. So not collecting, mostly analyzing of data.
Right.
So I think those are things that we are working on, but we have a fair good understanding of what customers do.
How about billing?
Oh, so billing is extremely complicated. We have some automation around it because if you think about again PLG versus SLG, right? PLG, which we're all self-serve model, so we generally have good billing aspect of it because customers know they're buying by seat based and it's pretty easy. But when it comes to some consumption based, like there are smaller customers, so we don't have a whole lot of lift and shift around billing, or we don't need a whole lot of manual effort. But when it comes to SLG or larger customers, we have a lot of billing effort. I mean, there is some automation already, but the problem is again around disputes management, conflict management, and those some of things are extremely challenging.
Yeah, I can imagine, because as you were elaborating in terms of where you are with your offering around AI-based services and how you're kind of experimenting, you're also testing your way in terms of where do we think the value lies. You
Yes,
also mentioned
correct.
transparency, understanding.
Yes,
I can see that this is a foundation for a lot of debate and disputes.
yes,
If you don't understand exactly what you've been using, then you're getting billed for a specific sum and you're saying, but I don't recognize, why am I being billed for this sum?
correct,
And
correct.
then here starts the back and forth. I can imagine that the
Exactly.
disputes will be starting to skyrocket.
Correct. And that's what we think is right now. I don't have outcome based pricing out in the market. We have more like conversation based, or we call it a session based pricing, which is more like actions as a
Yes.
saying. And there is less disputes there, but people, when they see a huge bill at the end of the month just because they overshot their own estimates, that's when the billing conflicts lie. So I think what is very important, for one of the learnings that I have is, instead of if I how can I reduce disputes, that's the big question that I have, right? And in my mind, I think as long as we do a good job of value selling and defining what should the customer expect, what is the definition of these pricing metrics, I think it's extremely important. And also give a sense on what does, maybe it's not just about just written documentation, but also in the demos as well. Hey, what does a session or a conversation actually mean for the customer? So these are some of the things we should look at.
So some of the best companies that we've had the pleasure of working with is that it's one thing to kind of collect the data inbound for yourself,
Mhm.
but it goes two ways. Transparency of the consumption data for the customer, being a B2B or B2C, is imperative. One of the
Mm.
huge upsides of usage-based is that it is per usage. But one of
Yes.
the downsides is that if you don't know where that lies and what triggers what, then
Mhm.
it creates a catch-22. So you also mentioned transparency
Mm.
previously. And I would say that this is one of those areas where businesses need to really look out for transparency towards the actual customer here. So basically on a daily or whatever cadence that is relevant in that specific business, so you know where you're at. How much have I consumed? How much is it going to cost me? The
Mm-hmm.
more you can inform and educate the
Yes.
customer, of course, the happier the customer, less disputes.
Correct.
But then
Yes.
again, this would expect a highly automated and sophisticated backend when it comes to usage data management.
Correct. Agree. And transparency, Vedant, is actually of two. There are two levels of transparency. One is at the customer level. Obviously, that is extremely important. And I don't, in my mind, when you release any particular offering or any business model, we should always have a transparent view of the usage to the customer. That is, in my mind, that is MLP, which is minimum lovable product, right? We should not release any product or offering without that. Now, but there is a second part to it, that is internal. You need transparency around the customer's usage for customer success, account managers, sellers. That needs to be there as well. Why? Because what customer sees is what we want their nurturing team to see as well. And more, there should be more detail on the internal aspect of it, because they should be able to answer any questions of the customer. So I think those are some of that's why I feel the transparency is two prong approach here.
That's a great point. That's an absolutely great point. Tapish, can you also paint a picture for us in terms of how your system landscape looks like? Because I think in light of what we just discussed, you said you're a fairly young company, you've been at a stage and now you need to mature. So walk us through what you have.
So I think from system standpoint, it's a very complicated, and I think we as if we are not part of the CIO organization, we always feel that hey, this is pretty easy. This is pretty IT is pretty easy. Like one of the challenges that every pricing person has is, hey, how does my billing system work? Can
Sure.
it supports new business? Can it support new business models or not? I want to launch something new on the consumption side or outcome based side. Can I do it or not? And generally the answer that I hear is the no, right? We are still some years before we can support these new models. And I think that is the case. I've started to believe that the systems will always be behind what the new business models will look for. So I think as a pricing person or a business model person, I've started developing a little bit of empathy for the IT organization. While we used to say, "Hey, change this billing system, change these backend systems," it's fairly very difficult to do that even for a smaller company like us. I mean, my previous job, where we were like what $12 billion company, I'm sure it was extremely hard there. It's not easy just because it's a smaller company that I work for right now. So I think those are some of the things now. I mean, obviously we have third party tools that we go use. I know when we started using a lot of open source systems as well, open source softwares. So we have to start getting rid of those and start getting into more enterprise centric systems and softwares, so that that can support our business model evolution in the future.
Yeah. Can you maybe indicate approximately how many different kind of data sources we're speaking about when we look at your system landscape between the CRM and the ERP and the billing system and potentially the data warehouses that you have when you collect all of that usage? What are we talking about in rough numbers? Are we speaking about the 10s and 15s, or are we speaking about the 30, 40s here?
I think just from if you look from billing and usage data collection, I feel I think we are at around easily around 20 plus for sure.
Wow.
And so that thing, and again, as I said, 20 plus is mostly on the usage data collection, usage
Yeah.
data assimilation, then analysis, and then obviously, most a lot of people end up using Excel to analyze the data. Then you have Tableaus, then you have Google. I mean, you just name it. There is a lot of analysis. So I think some of these need to be assimilated as well.
Well, we can say that there's a lot of also improvement to kind of unlock the speed and agility that you're after, because what you just described in terms of, well, it's great empathy. We all need to have empathy for all of our colleagues, but that aside, it is a huge challenge for businesses, because on one side, most of our discussion today, Tapish, has been about the potential of growing your business and the
Yes.
potential of basically doing that with an AI that then needs to be usage based. But then the reality is that you need to have a system landscape that enables you to do that as opposed to holding you back.
Yes. Correct. Yeah. So I think we do need enablement, when I say enablement, systems to enable our new business models and changing landscape. But I think some of this is also to the fact that a lot of systems that are around are also very nascent as well. So if you think about the legacy systems like SAP, Oracle, and stuff, they are also trying to evolve into the new age to support new age business models
Yeah.
too. But when you look at these startups or a lot of AI tools, or in fact AI, they're embedding AI into their into the package, into their products. It's actually very interesting, how they are evolving as well and how they're disrupting this old legacy business. Think about Zoras and the Arias. It used to be a company called I mean, still is there is still one. And I think I'm starting to see a lot of disruption by these new age startups, which is
Yeah.
great.
Tapish, we're going to take two questions
Mhm,
before we start to move towards wrapping up for today.
mhm.
So the first question here, both are from Stephen. The first question reads, what challenges are being observed regarding the unpredictable cloud costs related to AI usage on, for example, AWS and other platforms?
I think the question, if I read Stephen, is about especially increasing AI costs, but if we end up using the public cloud, and I
Yes.
think that is uh, uh, and that also depends on company to company a lot, because some of the companies are like, let's forget about AI cost usage, right? Cost it right now. Don't talk about margins. What we want is AI adoption. So I'm seeing that at least at Freshworks and even at other places, adoption is key. Cost, let's keep it aside for us for a second. But as a pricing person, we do definitely look, because what we don't want to be in a situation is we ignore cost from margin standpoint right now, and then later on suffer once we have a very good. So we're trying to keep a lot of balance around that. And challenges is obviously, because of consumption based, even like AWS, Azure, they offer consumption based pricing, or even if you go to OpenAI, the cost to increase quickly. Very quick example is, if you have a query based system or query based copilots, customers are asking a lot of questions. So for example, if I'm not a native English speaker, and my English is not great, but the question, I'll probably ping the system at least 10 times to get the answer, versus someone who's more mature will probably do it 2 times. So the cost is increasing from that angle. And I think very important is the LLMs have to start evolving from that angle to say, how can I make it more efficient for the vendors to provide services and reduce cost for them as well.
And let's take the second question while we're at it. What are the most typical metrics being used when measuring usage of AI? Is that queries or length of responses, as an example?
Yeah, I think it depends on the product. So, like AI agents is resolution time, deflection of tickets. I think that's another one. How many tickets were deflected or resolved by AI? That's another one. How much time did it take to resolve? And especially when it comes to different languages, it's also even more difficult, because what happens is, if translation aspect of it, right? AI do translation, live translation of what the customer is asking. I mean, your agent is sitting in US, whereas your customer is asking in a different language, let's say Japanese. How do you ensure that the AI agent is resolving, right? So the resolution time also increases too. So those are some of the things that we are seeing from AI standpoint. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So, one of the topics we didn't discuss so much today, I just want to quickly touch it, is there, when it comes to usage-based AI monetization, one of the biggest concerns, and there's been some writings about it, that it's going to be an ARR killer, but that necessarily has nothing to do with AI as much as it has to do with usage-based.
Yes.
But of course, the sentiment here is that since we all expect AI usage going up,
Yep.
and it needs to be usage based.
Yes.
Therefore, we're going to see an explosion of usage based revenue. And that in itself will then kill all predictability. Now, I'm just going to go first and say maybe it's not that bad. And for example, one of the previous episodes we had, we discussed usage forecasting.
Mm,
And there are ways, of course, granted you have the right system capabilities and the right type
mhm,
of data, you can
mhm,
actually start doing pretty interesting forecasting to
mhm,
guide yourself in terms of what you would expect in terms of usage and therefore, of course, revenues. And we're
mhm.
doing some of this tests with some of our customers that are kind of leading the pack. But I wanted to also ask you, Tapish, is this something that you're really concerned about in terms of it being an ARR killer?
I think that the notion is starting to creep up in our ranks as well. And the reason is because when you look at SaaS companies, their primary metric that Wall Street analyzes, especially if you're an IPO, is ARR. And that helps you with your valuation for a startup or even for a market cap for our companies like us too. And what happens as a result is if ARR is it's an ARR killer, and it also impacts that your sellers are compensated, your partners are incentivized by ARR as well. So we are starting to see that consumption base is probably going to be that way because you end up collecting money after the fact. So one of the things that we are thinking is how do we supplement it by buying programs. And when you look at buying programs, is obviously it brings in a little bit of predictability for the customer because when you look at this maturity of the customer, they are looking for predictability and transparency, how much I am going to spend. And then the from vendor perspective, it is how much it is going to cost me in the future, and I should budget for the cost as well, impacting my margins. So I think one thing that when I said is usage forecasting, as I said, it's very important that we collect the usage of the customer of the AI aspect. And to Stephen's part about how many metrics and stuff, and if I can have slice and dice and of all these AI capabilities by different metrics, I think we can do a little better job of the usage analysis. But yes, ARR killer is a real problem that is starting to come up, and we're thinking from buying program standpoint. And the last thing I feel that I think even the gap rules and all some of these accounting rules, if I have to say, will also change to account for some of these things because a lot of the costs or the way investors view some of the companies will might also end up evolving in the future.
Got it. All right, Tapish, we'll go for a wrap up and just a few final questions for you. But as a starting point, where do you see Freshworks when it comes to AI monetization, let's say a year down the road? And at the speed that we're going, I think a year feels like a pretty long time still.
Yeah. I think I think it's all tied to what customer wants from what kind of what kind of customer we want. Second is what does customer want from us, right? That is very important. And I think what will happen is I see the following changes happening, moving from seat-based pricing to a different pricing model, more consumption-based. Obviously, ARR is one aspect, but we'll think about it later. Second is looking at within consumption based, it is action based or outcome based is another one. So more value driven. And third is I feel that we will actually start looking at AI as table stakes as opposed to a premium capability. So I feel that is going to happen very soon across the industry, and we are not the loners here. And you'll see like Microsoft just did that with their Copilot too. So I think that's what we'll start seeing in the future from that angle. And but even if we include it as part of as part of, there'll be probably usage limits that we'll have to apply to control our costs too. So that's another pieces that we'll end up doing.
And Tapesh, what is your advice for anybody who's either contemplating dipping their toes in terms of usage-based AI monetization or is already on the way? What should we be thinking about to make sure that we're successful?
Um, Build a hypothesis, validate with customer first before launching anything. I think that is extremely important. And then obviously, like we do in any startup tries to put up a product market fit, think about whatever AI is resolving for the customer. Is that really a solved solution that we are doing for them? Are we really resolving customer problems here? and
Yeah.
then based upon that have a hypothesis on the pricing metrics, what pricing that you want to do, and think about AI as augmentation as opposed to a premium feature.
Yeah. If I may add one more point, because I think that it was a great one you raised, and it's about speed and agility. And I think that this is a factor you could argue has always been the case. But let's be frank. Over the past 15 years, the first 10 to 12 years, if we look at SaaS and subscriptions,
Mhm.
you introduced a pricing point. You had the
Yes,
same pricing point for 5 years. Maybe you adjusted a little bit.
yes,
In the
yes,
last 2 or 3 years, because of we've seen churn, we've seen fatigue in terms of subscriptions. Now the speed and agility question has become much more important. Why? Because we need to be better at providing alternative packages. We need to be able to test. You said it yourself. If you want to quickly introduce new price points for the same product and see what the adoption and response is. I
yes,
think if you take that point, and if you look at the AI with everything that you've shared today, this is one point that I would really urge everybody to think long and hard about. How does the backend look like? How do you manage that usage data so you avoid finding yourself in just a conundrum of manual steps and mistakes?
yes, agreed. And to your point, Vedant, one when you're looking at back office systems as well, when you're devising your new business models, you should include your IT team as well, get their feedback from that angle on how much time would it take if it's a company changing or business evolving model that you're going to launch. So include them early. Do not wait until you define and then say, this is what I want to do.
Tapish, thank you very much for the conversation today. It was super interesting. And also thank you to everybody tuning in. For anybody who wants to learn more about this, drop case study in the comments field and we'll make sure to follow up with you. We have more to share with you and more learnings in terms of customers that are doing this, and we'll be happy to follow up. Again, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everyone, for hearing us.